I'm here in a damp cellar in Ukraine. It's a partisan museum, and I'm with Joseph MacDonald, aka BigMac, he of BigMac's Battleblogs YouTube channel. And despite the repeated efforts of the Russians and the fears of my viewers, you're still mostly alive, aren't you?
More or less. More or less.
Mac, how are you?
Well, I left the army about probably about 7 months ago now, after just under 2 years in Kherson as mostly a drone pilot and sapper, although there were some infantry actions in that time, mostly earlier on when I joined that unit. And I left because of ill health, because the combined contusions to my brain from artillery and the mould and the smoke and the asbestos had got on top of my lungs, and also I had some problems with my kidney that actually have turned out to be a prostate problem, and just the combined weight of ill health.
You say your kidney, most people have two.
Yes, well, I have two.
Okay,
but I thought there was a problem with the right one, turned out it was my prostate.
And
my gallbladder. So, there was a lot of sort of middle-aged men's health complaints, plus war stress, plus artillery contusions, plus very poor respiratory conditions, which is occupying industrial buildings at the front that get shelled a lot,
Right. But you got yourself medically checked over.
I've been to the hospital quite recently and spent about 10 days sort of in a room on various machines and stuff, and had a lot of tests, and I'm on the mend. But yeah, it's been a tough couple of years. I came to this war thinking I'd be helping out with the medics, or some kind of logistics or engineering, and then I ended up in the infantry with the Legion, and not a lot happened until the Kharkiv counteroffensive, and then I left and I came back and joined a Ukrainian unit down in Kherson, and then started with the drones, and then the drone bit got really quite successful.
Right.
And now, after a couple of years of war, I've killed or helped kill a lot of Russians, and I've lost a lot of friends, and my life will never be the same again. And there's a heavy burden on that.
Yeah.
Do I feel okay? No. Was it still worth doing and the most important thing I've ever done? Yes. And if I wasn't in poor health, I'd be back there right now. But I am in poor health.
But you are planning to go back?
Yes, I am. My current plan is to sort of repair my health, so I don't feel exhausted after 2 or 3 hours out for a walk, and whatever, and go and do a bunch of fixed wing courses, and then go back to a sort of higher up the chain unit that will focus on longer range missions. That's my plan.
So drones is where it is, yeah? You think that the drones are going to win this war?
The drones... the most significant, there's all this stuff from the Telegraph, a terrible newspaper with terrible journalists and terrible photojournalism as well.
Oh dear.
Do a story about knocking out a submarine and use a picture of some guys firing artillery in a tree line. The Telegraph are bloody awful, and they keep using these phrases like, is this the game-changing weapon of Ukraine? Is this the game-changing weapon of Ukraine? The weapon that actually turned the tide of this war from early on was the Mavic, DJI Mavic drone, the Mavic 3. That was the game-changing weapon of this
Largely
war.
because they could get an awful lot of them. Yeah?
A lot of them, and they've got bloody good cameras, and the training time isn't equal, and then basically any infantry unit can have a magic eagle that can see for 10 kilometres and see everything the Russians are doing. And the weapon that has held the line in this war from the start is the drones, and right now, drones are more effective than anything. I know a lot of Mavic pilots personally who are over 300, 400, 500 kills. Meeting a Mavic pilot who's got 1,000 kills, or a Mavic team rather, because it's never just the one pilot, is fairly common. Think of a mortar team or an artillery team that can claim those results with such frequency. Of course there were German machine gunners on D-Day who had a ridiculous opportunity to cut down a lot of men, But that isn't the rest of the war. That's D-Day.
But the mortarman doesn't know where his bomb goes. He puts it down the tube, it flies off somewhere, it does something.
Well, these days, because of drones, they kind of do.
They have cameras, so you know.
But yeah, in my experience, the drones are, it's all about accuracy. It's all about putting warheads on foreheads, and nothing does that better than a drone at the end of the day. And yeah, if it wasn't for drones and the Ukrainian armies somewhat struggle, but you know, a lot of young people were drones. A lot of old people were not really getting the value. And I mean, I started like that. I thought at the start of the war that these videos of Mavics dropping little grenades into abandoned Russian tanks,
open hatches.
I just thought it was a PR stunt. It looks great for the cameras, but really we should be using these things for maximum artillery correction. You know, for a forward observer type role.
Right
now. Really, it's the drones, whether it's a Mavic, whether it's an FPV, whether it's a Baba Yaga, which is a big heavy lift drone, quadcopter type thing, or hexacopter, whether it's a fixed wing drone, what's doing 70% of the damage in this war.
Right.
There's only 30% left for artillery and mortars and mines, you know, and then 1% is actual rifle work. You know, rifle and machine gun work.
Right.
So the drones are the most effective thing, and yeah, although I'm probably one of the worst drone pilots in the Ukrainian army.
Surely not.
Statistically speaking, definitely so. But you know, when it's come to helping a drone unit and using the money that my donators gave me through YouTube to build bomb making workshops and bomb diffusing workshops and drone fixing workshops and put weapons into these really great young pilots' hands, that's where I've been of most effect in this war. And it's been horrifically effective, is the only way to put it.
So modern warfare is largely drones.
It's we need infantry. The land isn't taken until boots on the ground.
So only infantry can hold ground.
But as for taking it, we can replace most of those actions with drones now, especially when you're talking about ground drones as well. It's like, why clear that bunker when we can just drive a remote control car with half a dozen hand grenades strapped to its back, or a kilo of plastique strapped to its back into a house? And the minute we work out Ivan's in there, boop. You know, why risk the lives of X amount of men when you can do it with that? Why even taking ground is one thing, but holding ground can be done by drones. You know, remote controlled drones with machine guns, with Mark 19 grenade launchers, with rockets for bunker busting and house busting are becoming more and more prevalent now.
And has the drone made the sniper near obsolete?
I've killed a lot of snipers, and so's my team, and to the point where the Russians on the islands pretty much stopped. And then, you know, the unit changes and the new commander's like, yeah, we'll send some snipers. And it's like, yeah, you might have years of training. You might have the best rifle. You might have high quality thermal clothing. But thermodynamics is a bitch, yeah?
Right,
no matter how good the technology is, the hard rules of physics and the material world will always come up against it. And you might crawl to that position and that'll take you an hour. And then you've got about 2 hours before your heat starts to bleed from the very best thermal stuff. And all we need is a pinky and €4,500 worth of drone. And we'll spot you. And then a pilot with 6 week experience can quite easily drop a little hand grenade on you from hundreds of meters above you, where you'll never even hear it. You know, the snipers are in a mass wave assault. DMR rifle work, as much as skilled marksmanship, will always come in useful. But as for hiding out in a hedge and expecting not to be seen, well, camouflage against a thermal camera is completely worthless. So, you know, the day of the infantryman is sadly over. The day of the infantryman is about the same as the day of the cavalryman in 1914.
Okay, so sniping's no longer a thing. I've also been told that minefields now are more effective because drones stop people clearing them.
Yes, absolutely. You know, Harley, who's you've spoken
I've spoken to
before,
Harley, yes.
UAEOD, British guy who's with the Ukraine Partisan Army, the Ukraine Volunteer Army. His team and his guys who are still working have had a lot of problems like that clearing mines along the Kherson bank, because the drones will come and hunt those guys.
Right.
And the same for laying mines, you know. It used to be a matter of if you wanted to lay an anti-tank mine out in front of your position, because you're thinking the tanks, that you could just crawl out in the mud at 3 a.m. Drones don't care how well camouflaged you are. They don't. It's not like on Predator where you can just cover yourself in mud and you're good to go.
You cannot see me.
It does actually work surprisingly well, that, but for a short time.
Yeah.
Until that mud dries out and flakes off your arm,
And heats up, yeah.
and then you're embuggered, basically.
So now you put out a minefield, and whereas before you would then forget about it, it's a minefield in place, it wouldn't require any personnel to maintain it, it's just installed. Now you have drone overwatch over a minefield so that no one can clear it.
There's no way of sneakily sending your very, very brave sappers out to clear a path through in the night, because thermodynamic, you know, you might be able to do one mine at a time, you know, but then you've got to have a tremendous amount of sappers like lined up ready to go out after the next guy, because he's only got the time to do one or two, you know.
Right.
So it's
So the drone has made the sniper obsolete,
the
and
drone
the minefield
and the
much more effective.
The drone and the cheap and very good thermal cameras.
Yeah.
You know, I was flying some NATO drones over here. I'm not going to say what sort, because I'm pretty sure I'm not meant to. I'm pretty sure that's an actual secret.
Okay.
But these are expensive NATO grade drones, and the thermal camera on them is just a tiny bit better than what you get on €4,500 worth of DJI Mavic 3T.
Right.
You know, not that great. You know, but the point is, the camera on that is actually fantastic. You know, it's fantastic, and anything within 5 kilometres we can pretty much see when we're up there.
Right.
So that's thermal cameras have made the concept of camouflage obsolete completely. I mean, it still works against the Mark 1 eyeball, but you know.
Right. So the next revolution in warfare is going to be something to counter drones, presumably.
Well, yes, and there are many, many things to counter them, but one of the main problems we're encountering right now is wire-guided drones, and they don't have a signal that's being broadcast to them. They have a wire, and that contains all the communication they need for the cameras to work, for the bombs to drop, and for the thing to fly.
Right.
And all that, you know, that's as difficult to detect as a bird in the sky. You know, it doesn't emit, it emits heat, but that's about it, you know, and there's a lot of sky to cover. It's a big old place, and they're very small. They're the size of a seagull, more or less. So to counter drones, I mean, once you've detected them, you can shoot them down, but often the detection is based on signals operating and not there being a physical object there, you know. And the struggle to detect them by audio. You know, I had people a couple of years ago going, why don't you just build an audio detector? And it's like, well, there's a lot of stuff going on in the world other than the noise of drones, you know. And there's also the fact that if we're just trying to detect Russian drones based on audio, well, they use the same drones as we do pretty much. So they sound the same. So what is our noise and what is their noise? Are we going to stop using all our drones for half an hour just so we can detect theirs? What does that actually achieve? Right. You know, there is no clear solution to it.
And is anything better than the Mark 1 ear?
I mean, I have used Active Earring Pro on the front, and I would say that, it helps a little bit.
Right.
But also sometimes it picks up things that that it'll pick up the noise of trees creaking and stuff. It sort of seems to have a bit of a computer programming that decides what is a good noise to listen to and what isn't. So the Mark 1 ear, for listening to what's happening on the front at night, I'd still say is the superior audio device. As long as it's coupled with experience and a calm mind.
Right. So what's morale like at the front? I know you're in contact with a lot of people who are there.
It's bad. There are no official casualty figures, but I would say, at the moment, based on my
There
Why
are no
not?
official casualty
For,
figures.
for Ukraine, our casualty figures are basically secret, you know.
Oh,
So there isn't an official number of dead and wounded, but I'd say that up and down the line right now, pretty much every brigade is at about 50-60%.
right.
And if you talk about infantry, we're down at about 20% at best. That's a fact. There are hundreds of thousands of men who've deserted from the army at the moment, literally. It's a huge problem. A law was passed the other day that all of these guys who have gone AWOL, once they're caught, will be returned to it.
Well, we too were stopped earlier today,
yes,
weren't
yes,
we?
we were nearly rounded up.
Yeah, we're walking along the road, and a van pulls up, and the door flies open, and a guy in military uniform, looking quite businesslike, stepped out in front of me, and I have to say it was a bit of a scary moment.
Yes.
Oh my goodness, there's a guy who wants me to join the Ukrainian army now.
Yes, that's a thing. But all these AWOL guys, some of whom are guys who volunteered to fight for Ukraine.
Yeah.
And have bravely fought for Ukraine in the most hellish situations you can imagine, and have been in units that have lost 40% of their guys, and then gone out again,
Yeah.
and lost another 40%, and then maybe had some more guys come in and lost them. And these are guys who've been through First World War trench type hell again and again, only with automatic weapons and drones overhead. And some of those guys have eventually broke, and that they don't want to, that they're just not willing to continue in such hellish infantry type conditions. You know, they still want to serve, but they can't take any more of that sort of thing.
Everyone has a cracking point eventually.
And a lot of our very brave, very patriotic guys have reached a cracking point and then gone AWOL.
But my understanding is that a lot of people who go AWOL, they leave the unit they're meant to be with, but not in order to avoid the war entirely, but instead to join another unit.
Yeah, that seems to be what's happening, but the government have just brought a law in that if you're AWOL, you can only be returned to an assault company, which is a 50% death sentence these days. That's a fact too.
Yeah.
Things are bad. The line might actually break within the next year because we just don't have enough men left. It's a cold hard fact of it. I also think the Russians are kind of getting to a similar position. You know, they don't have enough people who are really willing to push that assault in, because everyone knows that it's just the drones control the sky, the drones control the battlefield. It's pretty much death to advance anywhere on either side.
Well, generally speaking, the longer a war goes on, the more that favours the defender.
Yes.
If you're going to attack with a very large force and you can win quickly, that's great for the attacker. But if you're brought to a halt, as the Russians have been, and then you're in this war of attrition, the longer things go on, the more likely it is that the attacker ends up losing.
I mean, we've been killing the Russians 5 and 10 to 1 for a long time now.
And it's about 2 to 1, I think, with material like tanks and stuff.
Yeah, but infantry were definitely like 5 to 1 plus, depending on where you are. And it's sustainable for the Russians. Unfortunately, they have a vast empire, and if they start you know, they've got countries like Kazakhstan and stuff, and you know, Uzbekistan, who were, you know, there's just no opportunity. Like $3,000 a month is like becoming vastly middle class there. You could go from being a pauper in the village to being, I own property. You know, I own multiple properties in a couple of years. So that the allure of it is very enticing. And also, you know, the Russians are much more willing to mobilise guys or offer the, you know, it's like prison. You know, we can put you in prison for kind of any old reason here. So prison or the front, what would you prefer?
But if you're dead, they don't have to pay you.
Yes, but you know, I mean, the you know, Russian prison is there's not much by the way of weaving classes and you know, learning, you know, education in there. It's pretty much just rape and fighting, you know. So yeah, you know, for the most part, they would prefer the front than prison in Russia. So yeah, They are not going to run out of men. Sadly, we've hit a point. And the thing is now, to join the infantry, you have to be really committed. To be effective, you have to be really committed to that as a role. Mm-hmm. You know it's dangerous, you're almost certain to die, but you are dedicated to be an infantryman because that's the kind of warrior you are. If you don't want to do it, I can't imagine you having any confidence in your ability to survive or be effective. Because even from the Second World War, infantry was only 1-3% of the kills, something like that.
But where's all the fancy kit? There are these Challenger tanks and so forth. Have you seen any of that at the front?
Not really, not down in Kherson. We've got a big river between us and the enemy, and it's all like island warfare. So there isn't. I've occasionally seen some French Caesar type artillery or PZ-2000 floating around the outskirts of Kherson. Right. But we don't get much cool kit down there whatsoever. I saw a Humvee one day. Apparently the guys hate it. Drinks like an alcoholic. All that stuff's out east, but right. Whether it's all of this stuff about, we gave Ukraine 20 Challengers or 30 Challengers and the Yanks gave them 50 Abrams, none of that really makes a great difference in the battlefield. And it does add, everyone was like, they're using M4s and AKs, that'll be a big strain on the logistics. Fuck off. It's 2 different boxes of ammunition, it's small arms rounds. If an army can't organise that, it can't organise the difference between oranges and apples on the food delivery, It's not a big deal. Maintaining 20-30 Challengers is a big deal. Yeah. Maintaining 20-30 Abrahams is a big deal. It's not just like any old car that any old mechanic can work on. You need specialisation training for that, So the most, people go on like the most effective tanks we ever got given were the 670 T-72s the Poles gave us. That was a decent tank delivery. Got hardly any press at all because they're not new and shiny. But you know what? If a T-72 puts a round into the side of a Challenger or an Abrams, that's a problem for that tank. It's maybe something they could ignore once or twice, but it's like, well, you could perhaps ignore 1 or 2 punches. Yes. But if you keep getting punched, eventually it'll become a problem. It's not like RPGs that they can, apparently there was a challenge in Iraq that can just sit there all day and drink tea inside.
It was brought to a halt.
It would probably, it took a track off, Yeah. But obviously no one was quite confident enough to run up and start trying to pry the lid off, and stick hand grenades down there. But not any tank that drives over a TM62 anti-tank mine is in trouble.
It's immobile,
It's immobile. Yeah. Maybe the tracks have gone, maybe the engine's gone, maybe the crew are all thinking that, oh God, I could probably do with a week off and a trip to the hospital, despite the fact I'm still all in one piece. There's no magic thing that's just so Western and so good that it's proof against everything, none whatsoever. That's why the real game-changing weapons of this war have been DJI Mavics, Baba Yagas, big heavy lift drones, and FPVs. They're the real game changers.
Right, and each one of these drones has a camera, but you still need a human pair of eyes attached to a brain looking through that camera to see what it's looking at and interpret it. So effectively, it's the number of pairs of eyes you've got holding the front, even if they're looking through a camera. And the front is just very big, so you need an awful lot of pairs of eyes.
True, but what? Like I remember, I think I've covered this before on previous interviews, but my first sort of successful thing in the Legion was using a big spotting scope to spot an artillery position that apparently the 90-second shell for me, that's kind of all the report I got on this, and apparently it was some artillery, they never told me what sort, so that was effective. Then I went on my first drone mission, and was like, so I've got a Magic Eagle that can see over hills and trees, and that $2,000 I spent on that spotting scope just seemed a big bloody waste of money. It's in Kherson gathering dust somewhere now. It never got used since. What you can do with a few €1,000 worth of drone is absolutely amazing, And I really don't think that NATO armies have really got together just how effective that is yet, And I think they're going to get if they do come as peacekeepers, if there's some kind of ceasefire, or eventually if they come to help us, which would be nice, Johnny come latelys, then they're going to get a big shock, a really big shock. You know,
warfare has changed.
The fact that an infantry platoon can have a 4-man element within it that gives them complete visual dominion of the 10 kilometres by 30 kilometres rectangle in front of them is something that I don't think any NATO army is really ready for, and they haven't incorporated into the thing. There's, for sure, there's incorporation of drone units. Maybe some specialist units are as up to date as a Ukrainian unit would be, but I still think there's too much pride and arrogance about previous results, you know.
So the role of the infantryman, so for instance, the role of the infantryman in a German squad in World War II was to support the machine gun, and the machine gun was the thing. And so now the role of the infantryman is you protect the drones, and
the drones are the eyes, the drones are the shield, the drones are the hammer, you know. And, you know, in the old days, I remember we were like, can we have some mortars, please? You know, there's chaps shooting at us, or we've spotted them, and it's like, that's what we wanted. Now, why ask for mortars when there's a drone? You know, the drone's more precise.
Yeah.
And it can see exactly, it can tell you more.
It can confirm a kill.
It can confirm a kill, it can confirm what you've seen.
Yeah.
It can, you know, all these things. Whereas a mortar, we're pretty sure there's some Russians over there, let's try and lob some bombs onto them. And, you know, you with a camera binoculars, unless you manage to be up some perfect hill that gives you line of sight, there's normally something in the way, you know. Drones don't have to worry about that. They can just like move around or go up a bit.
But what happens when it's very windy?
If wind and mist and extreme cold weather and rain are the enemy of drones. They're also the friend of drone pilots because it means we can have a day off, you know. That's had to be. So when it gets really bad in Kherson, it's like, right, 2-day break from war. There'll just be a bit of casual artillery over the next couple of days, and it's also
but it's the worst time for the infantryman holding the ground.
It's the worst time for him, but also, unless if for small action, yes, it's the most likely time that you'd get a raid. But that raid will be unsupported by your own drones, whether you're Russian or Ukrainian, and that is you go from having a smartphone or a radio and people on behind you can tell you everything that's going on.
Yeah.
You know, even if there's a tank pulled up that's about to start shooting you, they can tell you everything. To you only have the tunnel vision perspective of the man on the ground then. And if things go wrong, you're quite cut off from even accurate fire support. You know, we're just down to like coordinates and angle and dropping shells that'll hopefully help you out a little bit then, which could often be as much of a risk to you as they are to the Russians.
So this war has given you a sense of purpose, would you say?
Yes, it's the most important work I've ever done in my life, and I think it was one of the last things I said on the last interview we had, and it remains to be true. I feel like I've, you know, psychologically and physically paid a pretty heavy price for it, and my life is irreparably changed. The Russians know who I am. I recently...
Oh, what's it like to be a criminal on the run?
I recently... We had some journalists who were over here, and they were just doing something about Hutzel culture, and I was helping Pavel, and they decided to Google me to see if there was anything about me, and the first thing that came up was I have been convicted of war crimes in the Donetsk People's Republic, which I've never been to, actually been to Donetsk, for 14 years. And that was, they didn't specify anything I'd done, you know, they're just the fact that I am indeed fighting for the Ukrainians as a mercenary is 14 years in there.
Okay.
So, you know, I imagine, you know, I'm possibly safer in Ukraine than I would be just moving back and living in London, you know.
All right. You think a couple of burly men might bundle you into a van?
Well, you know, there is the old Novichok fucking Magnum on a Sunday, you know what I mean?
All right.
Go out for an ice cream and that'll be the last thing you do. But, you know, I always knew there would be consequences to this adventure, and there indeed have been. But it's been worth it. I've been genuinely useful for Ukraine. like my individual exploits as a soldier are perhaps not that great. You know, as I said, I'm probably one of the worst drone pilots in Ukraine, but based on how good the rest of them are, you know,
Right.
that I know. But I have achieved some incredible things, and some of that has come from YouTube. It gave me a place of public prominence and a degree of respect, and someone contacted me. And we had this T90 that was like hunting. It was attacking Kherson and hunting drone teams at the time. And he was good. He was really bloody good at his job, that T90. You know, there was so many guys trying to kill him.
Do you want to tell everyone what a T90
Well,
is?
T90 is one of the more modern Russian tanks.
Right.
And this guy was super good at using it in artillery mode, so he was able to shoot right across the river and get very accurately onto buildings and houses that drone teams were occupying, you know.
Right.
And he was also very good at infiltrating. You know, he had heat shielding on his tank and then getting away quickly, you know. So we had this guy who was hunting us for ages, and I mentioned this on my videos. And someone emailed me and said, I can help you get that tank. And I just thought, this guy is going to be some international special forces wannabe idiot who thinks he can just swim across the river and Russian drones won't find him, and he's going to be able to go and, like, you know, drag a javelin across the river or something and go and blow up this tank for us.
Whilst wearing a tuxedo.
But I thought, you know, out of professional courtesy, I'll stick the VPN on and reply to his email.
Right.
And it turned out that this chap was not a special forces guy and not in the military in Ukraine, and frankly, I don't know who he is.
Okay.
But he does know satellite data and have access to it.
Right.
And obviously I was quite cautious. Perhaps it's the Russians, but I thought, well, let's risk it for a biscuit. I spoke to my drone commander and I was like, what areas of the river do we think there might be Russians, but there isn't? And he goes, well, here and here and here. Why? Well, someone's offered us satellite data. And, you know, let's see if it works. And he goes, you're not giving away any of our positions. I was like, no, of course not. That's like a prisonable offence, you know, very clearly, potentially treachery, you know. Of course I'm not. He goes, well, okay, let's see if it works. And we found Russians where we thought there might be, but didn't know they were. We actually found where they were parking some of their boats.
So he sent you images?
Yeah, he sent us images. I'm not going to say what sort of satellite he was using because that would kind of give the game away a little bit.
Fair enough.
But it was very, very effective. And then this guy kept feeding us it twice a week. And twice a week we get this in-shot into what the Russians were doing much further away than where we had drones, and in weather conditions and stuff that it was difficult to use drones in. So this kind of spread. It was our brigade, our battalion didn't have much by the way of artillery, and it didn't even have much by the way of longer range FPV or Baba Yaga teams at the time. So we got other FPV teams who were working in our area to start you know, telling us where they'd like to find out if there were Russians. And this spread and spread and spread. And for about an 8-month period, I had 5 brigades in Kherson and their artillery and all their drone teams waiting with bated breath for the information to come in twice a week. And we also were helping out one of the airborne units up in Kupiansk, where I had friends who have got a very good drone team, and we were kind of sharing. We're giving them information, they're sending us drones, giving them information, they're sending us drones. And I think it's not unreasonable to say that that information and the cooperation of multiple brigades using it led to the deaths of thousands of Russians and hundreds of their vehicles. And I shit you not, that's really what I've managed to achieve with that. And it all came from an OSINT source. Perhaps it was the British government or the American government helping us on the sly. Perhaps. Or perhaps it was just some nerds, or one nerd, who's very, very good at satellite data. And, you know, these are things that can be accessed if you know how. So I wouldn't say they're entirely open source, but they are accessible if you know how. And he was very good at using that. So taking a risk and being being in a position where that risk was presented to me in the first place, because I have a YouTube channel, has become the single most effective thing I've done in the whole war. And that includes the $500,000 that I've raised for my channel and spent on drones and bomb making workshops and cars and all the things we needed to fight the Russians more effectively.
Thanks very much to viewers of this channel and of yours.
Thank you very much to Lindybeige viewers and the viewers of my channel. My channel will be back online soon, but yeah, I needed a break. I also lost the email password, whatever. Yeah, thank you very much for that. But that one thing has perhaps, at one point, you could say that it was responsible for like 0.5% of the entire Russian army's casualties for about 8 months, you know, which is not bad for one guy with a YouTube channel and a extremely pragmatic approach to risk, reward and regulation, you know. So good stuff.
Yeah, so you say that this war has given you purpose, but it seems to me that it's a strange thing that it's given you purpose but hasn't exactly made you happy, but the purpose is more important than the happiness.
I think modern people are very much driven by the idea that happiness is paramount, and I think a lot of people, especially Ukrainians, would get that your own happiness as a man is far from the most important thing in life. That principles and right and wrong and the rule of law and stopping a bloody dictator are far more important than whether you feel chipper and in a bubbly mood every day. So, you know, happiness is overrated, you know, at the end of the day. I'm satisfied by the work I've done. Has it made me happy? It's a different matter, you know. Happiness is for summer parties and festivals, you know, but you can't be I mean, there's a good line in Vikings: whoever told you you're meant to be happy all the time? You know? So yeah, not exactly happy, but certain that I've done the right thing and done it good and hard and achieved what I wanted to out of it, which was make a difference in Ukraine.
But other countries, Romania and Poland, which border on Ukraine, they are using, if you like, Ukraine as a buffer zone that's keeping them safe. It would be understandable if they were, maybe covertly at first, aiding the war effort, but do you have any evidence of that?
Well, I think from the very start, there's been a massive amount of military aid that's been sent in. When it comes to intelligence or covert operators, unless you actually work directly with those people, then you'd never know. You know what I mean? You just wouldn't know. Okay. I don't think, you know, in a linear, long front, peer-on-peer war like this, that special forces are particularly effective in most roles. You know, they're no more effective
in a war of attrition grinding on a front.
No more effective than decent infantry at the end of the day. I mean, okay, if you're talking about amphibious stuff in Crimea or whatever, then yeah, perhaps then that's the special forces play day, you know. But and there are bits of the front where infiltration by small teams is much better, but that's because of terrain. You know, you need hills and forests and sneaky places where drones start to suffer. An awful lot
of Ukraine is very flat.
And an awful lot of Ukraine is very flat, and it doesn't matter how well trained you are, there's no way to do a reconnaissance mission across a 5 kilometre wide wheat field without being seen. None whatsoever, you know. You could dig a tunnel, and that's about it, you know. And special forces don't like getting their hands dirty like that, you know. So, I don't think that there has been much stuff like that, but I definitely think, you know, I mean, what can I say? I don't know, but a lot of guys suspected that perhaps some of the HIMARS and Patriot crewmen might perhaps have been living in another country and perhaps had Ukrainian ancestry and perhaps been provided with a passport very quickly because they got good awfully quick, didn't they? But I don't know.
They were trained in Britain and other places just very well by extremely skilled instructors.
Yes, extremely skilled instructors whose last name might have been something with a Slavic root, perhaps. I don't know. That's all speculation. I mean, I've never even hung out with the infantry in this war. The infantry are the artillery, are special.
But not as special as the Air Force.
You know, exactly. And Air Force guys, you wouldn't even... If you met an Air Force guy in the bar, he wouldn't tell you he was working in the Ukrainian Air Force.
Yeah,
they're very, very special chaps, So, yeah, as a lowly drone pilot, as a drone pilot, I know a lot more about what's going on my area of the front than the infantry. But I have absolutely no right to know what the artillery are doing. Do we have any artillery today? It's like, don't ask that question. You know what I mean? Well,
right.
If we find a target, the artillery will tell us whether they feel like coming to shoot at it or not then.
But you were telling me that if you see the Air Force at all, that's a strong indicator that things must be really bad.
Yes. Although, things have changed. So I remember back around when Advika fell, a friend of mine was like, "Oh my God, the Air Force came in today." I was like, "Wow!" And he goes like, "Mate, we nearly lost 30,000 guys today. That's how bad it was. One of our flanks fell. The Russians were into the coal works, and then the Air Force came, and I think they lost a plane doing it. By what he hears, I think one of them got hit. And that's how bad it is. Like prior to that, I'd seen Ukrainian planes on the Kharkiv counteroffensive, and then once prior to that, and the guy had gone, very clearly blown up a huge ammunition dump, but we didn't hear him come back. But recently, so back to the T-90 that was hunting us. One of the first things the satellite data man did was find out where he lived, and we found this like hill bunker as possibly the way into some kind of salt mine or some kind of mine in the Kherson region originally. It seemed like a hill, but it very clearly had a bunker built into it. And we found out where he lived, and for like a year, I was firing that data package up command to any FPV team or any guys I thought would listen to me. Can we please get that bastard killed, because he keeps nearly killing me all the time, and I really don't like this tank. And we tried to hunt him with FPVs and drones and stuff, and nothing ever happened. And I think a few drone strikes were carried out on that bunker, but meh. And then about 2 months before I left the army, there was a French Mirage strike happened on another Russian command post that was just up the river from us. And I was like, "Ooh, that PDF, right," I fired this PDF to everyone. And 5 days later, a Ukrainian MiG dropped a £2,000 American bomb right onto the roof of that bunker. And I don't know if the tank was still there then. I think he was already dead by that point. But then that was like a whole brigade level command centre got wiped by a target that I found like a year plus before. That was satisfying. Getting an airstrike as a drone pilot is like, that's a proper target, and with proper results. So that was pretty damn good. Another high point.
There's the famous sketch, Mitchell and Webb, "Are we the baddies?" And a lot of people, World War II is a useful setting for a film, in that everyone has decided, the Germans were the baddies, and you just put the Germans in the black uniforms with the skulls and the lightning bolts, whatever, and it's okay to be working against them, because you could say, if you're working against them, you're one of the good guys, you're a hero. It's very, very simple. And here we are up against the Russians, and you seem so comfortable with the idea that you have killed Russians.
Never had a bad day's sleep about it.
No.
Not once. Some of the things I've seen weren't pretty. There was a bunker full of Russians, and a hole in the bunker because we'd already bombed it, and they've sent the Russians into the same bunker, and there's a guy in the hole praying for us not to drop the bomb.
So you're seeing him through a camera
at
this point? Yeah.
And, he didn't put his rifle down, and the rest of his friends didn't come out of the hole with the rifles, so we dropped the bomb. That wasn't very nice. Whoever said it was going to be nice, you don't always get a pleasing narrative with how you kill people or how you defend yourself, Another time, we'd reached a point where the area across from us, Kardashinka, Potemkin Island, Holopristan, it's largely abandoned by civilians. And we started to focus a lot more on denying the enemy positions.
Right.
And you can do that by blowing up a house with a big bomb, or you can do it by setting it on fire.
Mm-hmm.
And they're using the forests around there as well. And one day I remember getting back from work, and it's like we'd left work just at twilight, and we got back to the house, and we're looking out. My friend are looking out the window, and there's pretty much like a 5 kilometre wide fire in this forest that we'd caused, and a couple of villages sort of around that area that have got multiple houses burning. And I was like, are we the baddies? Because I feel a bit, I'm not sure whether we're affecting any civilians right now, but maybe. That fire got out of hand. But it was effective.
Yeah, so this is scorched earth policy.
I mean, in microcosm, to the enemy. It was one of the, we found that went with a day where it's like, well, we know they're using that house. We know they're using that house. We've dropped some bombs on it. Let's burn the house down. We want to destroy their equipment and destroy any ammunition, any electronics they've got there. That's really key.
So you can use drones to drop incendiaries.
Yes,
as well.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I like making incendiary bombs out of the Russian incendiary bombs they shoot us. I like return to sender policy. But yeah, we also found that they had some ammunition and some guys in the forest. So we were like, well, we'll drop some bombs on there, but we can also start a fire on this road out the forest, and this road out the forest, and this road out the forest. So now they can't just pack up their stuff and leave. They're stuck in a forest fire. And well, I don't think any of them got out. I don't think they had any equipment left afterwards. But yeah, burning men to death makes you feel weird. It makes you feel weird. It's not nice. It's not satisfying. Yes, in real life, I probably would have got on with some of those guys. Well,
going down this grim road, you were telling me of the islands, as you described them, which were largely swamps, which had a few defensible positions, which the Russians occupied over and over again. And the Russians would occupy, you would kill some, they would reoccupy, they would kill some, so presumably
they're in a basement full of corpses.
After a while, the reinforcements are coming in to a room with a load of bodies in it.
Yeah.
And yet they stay there.
Yeah.
And then you kill them.
Yeah.
And then more reinforcements are sent. The people
It's a horrible fucking meat grinder.
The people sending the reinforcements presumably know what's happened to the ones that got sent before them.
Absolutely. They do.
So what is in the Russian mind? We've sent reinforcements to this, I don't know how many times, but lots. And the same thing has happened to them. They've gone to the same places and have suffered the same fate. And they're all dead. So we're going to reinforce them to what purpose?
Because they've been told by high command that they need to hold and occupy that land to push forward, so they do. And it's just a dog-like or slave-like obedience to pointless rules. Generally speaking, a lot of the Ukrainian army will get a lot more pushback than that with their officers. It's like, that's a fucking terrible idea. No one wants to do this.
Right.
And it's just going to get everyone killed. And then what do we do tomorrow when everyone's dead, Whereas the Russians just don't have any of that, basically. They just have Second World War grade, USSR grade obedience. Or, and there are, if you go onto Russian Telegram, there's a lot of evidence of them using violence and even firing squads and stuff, or against their own guys to get them to obey. And that, if a Ukrainian soldier really disobeys an order, well, there's prison at the end of the day. There isn't summary execution, or anything like that. So when you say what's in their minds, it's like no one understands the machinations of the mad at the end of the day. What a madman thinks is what a madman thinks, and a sane man shouldn't be expected to quantify it.
Yikes. Okay, so what's next for you then?
Get my health back together, get the channel back up and running, do a bunch of fixed wing courses, go back to the military in some capacity, or perhaps my role as organiser, volunteer, logistician, advocate for Ukraine would perhaps become more important. And that pretty much depends on how much money continues to run in and how I can spend it effectively. Because I have to admit, when the donations got to a point where like I'm really effectively being able to do a lot of stuff, at that point my commander was like, there's not a lot of point to us sending you on drone missions at the moment. You're managing 3 workshops and a drone school and all the cars that are coming in, and you're taking the cars from mechanics. You're basically full-time battalion company logistics officer at the moment. So set your own schedule. So for like the last 4 or 5 months of the war, I did do some drone missions and stuff in that time, but it was pretty much when someone was sick or was on holiday, and I just like, okay, yeah, I've got extra work this week now, I've got to do a few combat missions as well. But most of the time it's just a full-time kind of, it's like, I'm not a 25-year-old footballer. I'm someone who was an okay player for the club back in the day, but now I've done all right managing a construction company, and now I run the football club, or I'm one of the assistant managers, and I make sure that they've all got new football boots and half-time oranges and that kind of thing. So I graduated to that kind of role.
Right. And sometimes you're actually more useful as a fundraiser.
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, being a TDF unit, the army never gave us. They never gave us a single Baba Yaga. All the Baba Yagas were big, heavy.
Baba Yaga being a particularly large drone that can carry a heavy payload.
And they never gave us a single one of them. So all of our Baba Yaga fleet was either donation money from me, or it was donation money from the guys. I think they managed to get about 2. You guys helped me pay for 7. Which killed an awful lot of Russians and reduced an awful lot of positions that we otherwise couldn't have blown up. Because if you want to blow up multiple thick concrete buildings, you need artillery tubes full of TNT. You can't do it with a million hand grenades, but one big bomb will do it.
So the Ukrainians need men, they need drones, they need cars.
Yes.
What else do they need?
Like components to build drones and repair drones, and also components to make timer switches and other kinds of switches for bombs. We need 3D printers and wire. We need thermal sights and night vision, because the old Mark 1 eyeball and a soldier on the ground at night is still, once the weather's bad enough too bad for drones, then thermal scopes and night vision are still kind of all you have, and that none of them are cheap, but really we need willing men, and if anyone out there wants to come to Ukraine, you don't have to sign up for the infantry these days. Learn a bit of the language, and drone courses are readily available to pay for privately before you join the military here. And that's the future. If you're interested in a career in private security afterwards, who do you think that big firms would like to pay more to protect their shipping or protect their factory? A guy stood around with a rifle, or a guy who can fly a drone around and see everything that's happening in 10 kilometre square around that business? No bugger can sneak over the fence at night because you're up there with a drone. Who do you think that big private companies want to pay more money to? Mr. Rifleman or Mr. Drone Pilot? Think about that, lads.
Right. Oh, and you'll find a link in the description to an organisation that does up cars, 4-wheel cars, and sends them to Ukraine as well.
Absolutely, yeah. We'll link you to Harley at UAUD's page, and he is, a guy who does that all the time.
Sound guy, I've spoken to him a few times. Yeah.
Very trustworthy, absolutely trustworthy. So, any more questions?
Bloody good luck.
Thank you, Nick. Good to see you again. Thanks for visiting.
Thanks for inviting me.
All right. Slava Ukraine, Oroyam Slava. God save the king.
And God save the king.